Well, now we're going to do the review for section 6.1. And to begin with, I want to point this out. You know, when you evaluate the composite of a function and its inverse, then what you get back is what you started with, A, and also f inverse of f of A equals A. So, with that established, now we have number one, the cosine of the inverse cosine. So we've got a composite function here of -3/5, and that's going to equal -3/5. Now let's do number two. Find the exact value. Number two, we've got to find the exact value of the inverse sine of -√3/2. Well, for the inverse sine function, the range of that is it's the first and fourth quadrants. Excuse me, it's defined for the first and fourth quadrants. So then this is an angle, by the way. This is an angle. And that angle lives in one of these two quadrants, and it's going to be -π/3 equals -π/3. And we're done. So now we'll do number three, and that is f of x equals 5 sine of x plus 2. And now let's do the domain and range of f and f inverse. And they gave us the domain of f. It's -π/2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to π/2. So the range of f inverse is going to be -π/2 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to π/2. And now we have a center line at 2, and the amplitude is 5, so we're going to go 5 units above 2 and 5 units below 2. So therefore 2 minus 5 is going to be -3, and we're talking about the range of these functions now. -3 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to, and 2 plus 5 is going to be 7. And so the domain then of the inverse function is -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 7. So we've taken care of the domain and range of f and, oh, we have to find f inverse, yes. Okay, let's do that. So we'll replace f of x with y. So we have y equals 5 sine of x plus 2, and then we'll exchange x and y, and so we get x equals 5 sine of y plus 2, and now we'll isolate 5 sine of y, so 5 sine of y equals, and we'll have to subtract 2 from both sides, x minus 2. Now we'll divide both sides by 5, and we get sine of y equals x minus 2 over 5. And finally, to isolate y, we'll say we'll take the inverse sine of both sides. And so what we get on the left is y, what we get on the right is the inverse sine of x minus 2 over 5. So now we can claim that f inverse of x equals the inverse sine of x minus 2 over 5. And if you let x be, let's just check that out. We'll let x be, let x equal -3, and so what we'll have is the inverse sine of -3 minus 2 is -5 over 5, which equals the inverse sine of -1, which equals -pi over 2. And also, if we evaluate the inverse sine of 7 minus 2 is 5, we get 5 over 5, which equals the inverse sine, inverse sine of 1, which equals pi over 2. So, worked out. Anyhow, here's our guy.